Today on the podcast, I am joined by Gordon Borrell. He is the CEO of Borrell Associates, I believe former chair of the Local Media Foundation and the Local Media Association. And, I see him around the space all the time. He goes back a long time. So, Gordon, thank you for being here. Appreciate taking the time.
Thank you for having me. I do go back a long time, 1957 to be exact. Everybody's doing the math right now.
All right. I have a good, you're pretty close to my mom, I think, 53. My dad's 49. There we go.
Just don't call me. Just don't call me Dad, okay?
Yeah, all right. I'll try not to. Cool. All right. Well, I did a little brief intro, but I like to start the podcast by just having everybody set the baseline. Just tell me about your background and your story in local media. You don't have to do the whole thing, but yeah.
Probably all started with my mother. She was like a grammarian. She worked at the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, basically as a typist. And so she kind of knew that stuff and would correct you, as a child. And you knew, you correct your grammar, and you knew when she was pissed because she began to, dictate. She would say, "You forgot to take out the trash last night, period. Therefore, comma, you will be doing the dishes the rest of the week instead of your sisters!" Exclamation point. So that's what she would do. Even when I went to Boy Scout camp in 1969 up in Canada and dutifully wrote my mother a letter, tell her how it was. When I got home, I'm unpacking my knapsack on the bedroom floor, and there she is in the doorway with the letter in her hand. And she said, "You wrote a very eloquent letter. Thank you very much about life in Canada in the woods. That's wonderful. You made some grammatical errors. I took the liberty of," and she handed me back the letter with red ink corrections on it. I still have it. That began my career. I was a college newspaper reporter and then editor-in-chief. I then became a reporter for the Virginian Pilot, a daily newspaper, covering all kinds of things, and then became a city editor, an assistant metro editor, and then figured out how much money was in reporting. And I went, hell with this. And I moved over to the corporate side, more new media and management, and was the guy. I was at all of about 32 years old, named vice president of new media for a $1 billion company and charged with helping lead their entities, newspapers, TV, radio, the Weather Channel, Auto Trader, onto the internet. So that's the background.
Awesome. And tell me about Borrell Associates. Like I said, I see you guys around a lot. What do you guys do there?
In the process of doing what I was doing for that big company, we had a deep understanding of disruptive innovation. We brought a guy named Clay Christensen, who is fairly well known in the industry. He coined the term disruptive innovation and wrote a really good business book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And I thought, I'm going to take that. I'm going to help the entire newspaper industry and local media industry understand disruption. So I started Borrell Associates in 2001, attempting to help companies navigate, and still doing it today, disruptive innovation. It's not an easy thing to do, and there's some classic mistakes that are typically made. 25 years later, we've helped thousands of companies like Knight Ridder, Tribune, Media General, Nexstar, CBS, even Google, YouTube, Facebook, Yahoo, cable companies, etc. So that's what we do. Most of what we do is licensed data. We have deep, rich advertising data, which helps you follow the money, which is a key to navigating disruptive innovation. And a lot of folks license our data. We also have some great insights in all of that research that we do to get that data.
2001, you founded it, man. You had your finger on the pulse early with the whole disruptive internet thing coming on the scene in local news or just media in general.
Yeah, I knew early on that I would probably be a pariah of some sort. Not as much of a pariah as a guy named Frank Daniels III, I believe it was, whose great-grandfather was Josephus Daniels, Secretary of the Navy, and coined the term Cup of Joe while he was Secretary of the Navy. But they ran the News and Observer, that family, and Frank III was my age. And he boldly stood up and declared newspapers would be dead, within 5 years, which I think was about 2003, which would have been 2003. I wasn't going to do that, but I was going to say, you're in a deep shitload of trouble. This is back in 2001 when I started the company. And I could prove it, and I began showing the data of things that were happening in their markets. Nobody believed me. It didn't really occur that I think the majority of people believed what I had to say until the pandemic. The pandemic hit and everybody, went home and went, "Oh shit, he was right. It's happening." So yeah, it's hard. Change is difficult and it's very challenging for people, and fools tend to, fall in a ditch and scream at other people.
That's fall in a ditch and scream at other people. That's a great portrayal of it. And that kind of leads right into one of the other ones that we were just talking about. So you rephrasing this because I wrote it kind of wonky to begin with. The narrative out there in the like the mainstream media or whatever is that local news is dead, it's dying, and like you said, you were kind of calling some of that stuff early on and have been ringing that bell for a while. And yes, the pandemic kind of called that into stark contrast. How do you think that aligns with the internal reality of local news? Do you still what's your take on it now? Like, do you think it's dead, it's dying? What does the landscape look like right now from your vantage point?
It's old media run by idiots is dying and dead, and they're on this quixotic, path. They're like, "Oh, Donald Trump is done, and all this bullshit." And it's like, well, no, not really. There's been an erosion of trust in media that's been going on for decades, and probably, well deserved. So I'll come back to the negative part because it's kind of fun. But let me just say this. The ones who will survive are the ones that will recreate it and go, okay, wait, there still is a business to be made, supported by subscribers or supported by advertisers or maybe somebody else, philanthropists, in informing the public and entertaining the public. For years, newspapers, when I joined the newsroom back in the mid 70s of, big newspaper, late 70s, there were still the old heads there, the guys from the in the 60s who had been reporters. And they were great storytellers. They were hardly ever in the newsroom because they were in the bars all the time collecting stories. And news was entertaining and it was fun. And then Woodward and Bernstein came along and it became important. And I remember in 1989, I believe it was, when I had left the newsroom, I wrote an article for editor and publisher, and it was entitled "Memo to Newsrooms, They're Laughing at You Out There." Because as soon as I stepped into the business world outside of the newsroom, where I thought everybody was brilliant, we were the leaders with the torch, right? I realized, no, a lot of people are laughing at us. They're going, "Oh God, those guys are such fools." That was kind of hard to hear, but then again, it was kind of true. So I do think the media's portrayal of itself, we're all in trouble when reporters start interviewing reporters, right? So the media's portrayal of itself is, woe is me, I've fallen into a ditch. Let's blame everybody who's walking by. And I don't think that's right. I think it's like, damn it, get to it and change. The world has changed. There's one thing that happened, I'd say maybe 10 years ago. I was in New York. I had to speak at Montclair State University, and I was at another university. It wasn't that. It might have been New York University. And Jeff Jarvis was there. He's pretty well known in the industry, pretty, provocative, journalism teacher. And this was during the Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump campaign. And Donald Trump had just been nominated by the Republican Party. Jarvis came in, and I knew Jeff pretty well. I've known him since the 90s. And he had a Hillary Clinton baseball cap on. I thought, wow, that's kind of biased. Wait a minute, you're a journalism professor. You're endorsing one candidate. And he said exactly this, and I remember it really well. "The nomination of Donald Trump as the GOP candidate is journalism's failure." And I thought, how frickin' arrogant is that? That's the exact type of arrogance and lack of connection with the American people that that eroded trust in media, over the years. So I think the media's portrayal of itself, yeah, there are news deserts, but what should take its place? People still want information. Maybe that information is as silly as it may seem. Who made Eagle Scout last week, right? That's good and that's important to frickin' communities. So maybe they're not, maybe they have the wrong economic model. Nobody wants to pay for a newspaper, to be printed up by a giant printing press and delivered by people you have to pay on your doorstep every morning or once a week as a compilation of all the frickin' news that occurred, last week. Everybody heard about at the coffee shop or on TikTok or something like that. So redefining yourself, I think, is really, really important, and it shouldn't be in the hands of newsroom people. They're just, they're just. I'm sorry for the most part, some of them are idiots. Not all of them. It's certainly as you go down into the smaller markets, I think they're a lot more in tune with their communities.
Yeah, you just talked about redefining themselves, like local media entities, organizations, and you talked about positives and the negatives there, like you said. So you talked about entertaining the reader, and you talked
Yeah.
about models. What do you think? Like, this show's mostly focused on local media. What needs to change? The content or the model or both? What do you think? How do you think about that?
Both. So there's one really important thing that I learned when I made the move from the newsroom, from the church to the state, from the newsroom to the business side of the business, is that my job would not exist if people wouldn't pay for what we did, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's through a subscription or through advertising. And so to me, the journalism model was less important. We fold the newspaper in the box or on the stand with the news and the headlines, not the advertising. But, the world is really, to them, news is not the front page headline. It might be the coupons. There's a startling statistic that I'm sure is no longer true, but had been true for years, and that was 51% of people who picked up a newspaper on Sunday were picking it up for the advertising. So you need to put that in front of the newsroom's face. Say, look, yeah, news is important, but advertising is important. The biggest section of the newspaper at one point was classified ads. How did we lose that? How do we lose that belief that no, it's not about, routing the bad guys and let's be Woodward and Bernstein in our local markets. That's important. Yeah, go ahead, do that. But, how do we talk? Was the head of the guy who created, the Detroit News. He told the newsroom, write like people talk. How do you get in front of people and talk with them and write about stories that matter to them? I think that's what you have to do, and also find, and this is a difficult part, find the medium that communicates with them. It may still be print in local markets to a great extent, but is it really the web? Are they going to continue to go to the web? Is it an app? Will they download an app for your little newspaper, among the 50, 60 other apps that they have on their phone? That's the really difficult part. I do think there is a place, and you have to find it in local communities, for aggregating information and telling stories in a way that doesn't automatically get to people through TikTok or Facebook, a Facebook neighborhood page, the TV news, which may be based 30 miles away. It doesn't get to your little local market to really tell any of those stories. There are niches out there that could be fairly important. I would suggest that you look at the business model as equally as you look at the content model. That's really important. How are you going to make money at this? If you don't make money at it, you don't have a job. You don't have a business.
Yeah, I thought you'd say something like that. It has to be both.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be predictive.
You're talking about like how people in a local area look for an ad. It's funny. Those can be super high value. A quick example: just yesterday, I was bringing my toddler home from preschool, and I had the radio on. He likes to listen to music, and this ad comes on, and I never listen to the radio really. And it's like, hey, come to this parking lot by the local greenhouse right now. You can get 20 ribeyes for $39. I'm like, are you kidding me? It was
Whoa.
2 blocks away. I drove over there. There's a big truck. 20 ribeyes, $39. I had to make the stop. That was a very well-placed ad. That stuff is super valuable. Just things like that to keep in mind for
They
local
weren't
folks.
like raccoon ribeyes, were they?
They looked pretty good.
Yeah.
I stuffed them into my freezer. I have not cooked one up yet, so
I hope you're not
I'll
sorely
get back to you.
disappointed. You get
I'll
what
get
you
back to
pay
you on that.
for. Have you ever heard
I
that?
know that's good. That's what I was worried. They look pretty decent though.
But there's so much of that local
Yeah.
that's missed. I started the Facebook neighborhood page. Long story behind it. It was run by somebody else who just kept censoring everybody. Somebody said something that somebody else didn't like and they got censored. So I was going to do it. And I hardly ever touch it. It's like a free for all. I don't think I've ever banned anybody, but I've warned a couple people. And the wonderful thing about it is they talk about stuff that I would, in my high intellect, consider nonsensical, like a lost frickin' dog and a an eagle, a bald-headed eagle that keeps stealing cats? I'm cheering it on. But, these things are important to people, just things like that, break-ins to cars and somebody suspicious seen in the neighborhood. And, how do you get to that level to talk about what's actually happening in the neighborhood that generates an audience that you can monetize? And I think that's what needs to be recreated. A lesson from disruptive innovation is that if you start with an existing model and just try to morph it to new formats and things like that, that's not good. You really need to break it down every so often and go, hey, if we created the business completely anew, what would we do? And that's a scary thing to do. And sometimes you don't have enough money to do it. But making the business completely in tune with whatever the business model should be and the consumers is just really, really important. Taking it incrementally from, well, we have a print newspaper, so let's throw all that crap on a website. Might work, might not, probably won't.
Yeah, you just said that can be scary, switching that whole business model and everything. And, big theme on the show is innovating and building sustainable models for local news. So I saw a quote when I was doing prep for this, I think with Mike from Editor and Publisher,
Mm-hmm.
where he said, owners focus newspaper companies more on maintaining profit margins than on being innovative and taking risks. And, you were just talking about this. I understand the incentive from business owners, and it can be scary, but how do you think this mindset could be shifted towards taking risks or trying new things? Do we need to wait for a new generation to come in? It's kind of a hard question to answer, but how do you think about that?
Yeah, we probably need to wait for all those bastards to die out. Yeah, I hope people are laughing, but it's only partially facetious. I think first someone needs to step up and tell the emperors they're naked. And that is, CEO, chairman of the board of directors, and maybe ask them, the question, aside from all the capital and regular expenses, what percentage of revenue are you investing in the future of this company? Just sit back and wait for the answer. In the third quarter of this year, Google became the first company to make $100 billion in revenue in a single quarter. It's like
Crazy.
it occurred in 1981, I think, for an entire year. GM became the first money to do that, first company to do that in an entire year. Google did it in one quarter, and in 2026, they're going to put that money, $100 billion with a B, into R&D. That'll be 2026, probably 22% of their total revenue. So we examined 31 publicly held companies, 13 pure play internet companies, 18 local or media companies, most of them local, Gannett, Odyssey, iHeart, Lee Enterprises, etc. So every single one of the 13 pure play companies reported something in R&D expenditures. It ranged from 4% of total revenue for Cars.com, for instance, all the way up to 40%. Alpha or Google came in at 14% of total revenue, Zillow at 24%, Meta or Facebook at 27%. Not a single one of the 18 publicly held media companies reported an R&D expenditure. There's your indication there ain't much future. I mean, really, you got to do some shit, especially with the pace of technology, and do enough that some of it will fail so you can get a success out of it. And I understand, okay, if I were a CEO in that position, what would I do? I'd be crying. I'd be up a lot at night, but I would certainly eke out money somewhere and say to the owners, and probably get fired as a result, well, we're going to have to do without profits, for the next 2 or 3 years because we need to invest in the future. Do you want profit now? The answer is yes, by the way. Or do you want long-term profitability out of this company, long-term sustainability? You talk about sustainability, and it's often applied to the environment. But, maybe business sustainability is, okay, you really do have to invest in the company to get that. And you can't keep turning to philanthropists because philanthropists are going to do what philanthropists do, and they'll withdraw the money once you piss them off. So I'm not sure that's a sustainable model.
Yeah, it's that's crazy. Zero R&D budget amongst all those players. You know where it's happening, and I just say this because I talk to a lot of people from all over the spectrum on this show. It's happening in new little, somebody will start a digital first newsletter in a community or whatever,
Yeah.
or a podcast here. That's what's happening. But if the big guys sit around and don't update anything, they're just gonna get, they're gonna fade away.
Let me
And
give you a big, hairy, audacious idea, and this is one of the ones that come from the business side of me and not the journalism side. So a lot of journalism people listening to this and newsroom people, if I haven't already pissed them off and made them take their earplugs out, wait till they hear this. You know, the stories to be told where there's a lot of money to be made is the stories of local entrepreneurs, and they're willing to pay for it. So there's the cut between, he's not talking about journalism anymore. He's talking about advertising. But think about it. You know, the Chamber of Commerce did a survey maybe more than a decade ago that said for every dollar spent with a locally owned business, a florist, a locally owned roofer, HVAC company, not, McDonald's and Walmart and Target and places like that, 30% more, stays in the community. That is because they pay more, they hire local people, they invest back in the community, they tend to buy community goods as opposed to Walmart, which is very regimented, or Target. The goods come from outside the market, They run out of lettuce, they don't run down to the local grocery store and buy a head of lettuce, type of things like that. So here's what's happening, where the democratization of the media has occurred, and the new competitors for traditional media companies are the advertisers themselves, those businesses, because now they have their own traffic on their website or their Facebook page, and they have a need to feed that traffic to create stories every single day. The story is, hey, we got a big sale. We're a bike shop. We got a big sale on a mountain bike. It's aluminum frame, very lightweight. You should come down and see it right now. It's 20% off. Do a little video of somebody riding a mountain bike around the parking lot, right? So suddenly they have content. And then they go, wow, look, we got some likes and some comments. That great. Some people came by. And then tomorrow, oh gosh, we got to do something else. You got to feed the machine. They're becoming media companies. If you don't believe me, Walmart makes billions of dollars off of advertising on its website because it's got traffic to its website. It's become a media company. Kroger's become a media company. Target has become a media company. They've all created their retail media networks and are selling advertising on their page because they have some of the most valuable content there is. Not lean back and read about entertainment type stuff. Lean forward when you're ready to buy something, wallet-ready consumers. So I think there's money to be made, and a lot of it, in helping local businesses tell their story. Maybe not on your website or in your newspaper, but on their own website or on their own YouTube video. There's a lot of money there, and it's very altruistic to help. What started this country is a bunch of entrepreneurs, business people, and in their local communities, for God's sakes, they need help. They need help to fight against the Targets and the Walmarts and the others. Help them, and your community will probably grow in jobs and income and everything else. They don't know how to market themselves, by the way. You should be able to tell stories and help figure out what type of advertising they should buy, where they should place it, how to measure the ROI on it, things like that. That's where they need help.
Yeah, I think that's a huge space that's being slept on too, the local entrepreneur thing. I just did a presentation for the branded content project, I think is what it's called. And I had a newspaper publisher come to me. I produce podcasts for local media companies. That's my company. And they have an existing podcast with good engagement, good listeners. And they had this idea they came in with. I thought it was brilliant. They want to, I think it was a pet supply company in their town, wanted to get on the podcast. And instead of just bringing them on, they came to me and they're like, what if we put together a 3-part miniseries? One's on the history of the local dog park, brought to you by this pet supply company. The next one is about the pet costume party, and then, create that, we put it out in their feed. That's the kind of stuff people need to be doing. And people are willing to pay for it. Like, it's a big upsell on our end. But stuff that's just what came to mind when you were kind of bringing that up there.
Yeah, and a lot of people go, oh, I don't have the resources to do that. About 10 years ago, my wife was writing freelance copy for the Smithfield Times, I believe it was, in Smithfield, Virginia, the Smithfield newspaper. And I don't know how we came across this. She wrote a story about a local baker, a woman who had a local bakery. And I said, let's do a video of her. We'll go do a video. Me, and my wife. My wife doesn't really know a lot about technology. Long story short, we shot a video. Me with some little camcorder, right? And I did have a lavalier, and we did create some lighting, and my wife did some editing, and it was a really cool video. It was just, hey, this is what I do at my shop, and this is, the type of stuff that we make, and this is a favorite, and here's the recipe. Here, I'll show you how to make it. And it was really, really cool. So my point is, if I can do it, I really don't know much about all that stuff. And my wife, who knows a lot less, it was a really cool video. You could too. Just start somewhere and do it. It's storytelling. It's what the community wants. It may not be journalism. It may provide, as I think McClatchy's long-term goal was, I don't know if they still have it, we need to create businesses that provide significant revenue that allow us to create quality journalism for communities. So it was a means to an end rather than, oh, well, that's what we do. We help businesses tell their biased stories of how great they are. Well, it's their story. Let them tell it, help them script it out, use AI for it.
Yeah, and you need to think about competing with like media overabundance with TikTok feeds and everything. My friend Kenny Katzgrau, shout out Kenny in Broad Street. He was on the podcast before. He runs a local publisher in his town, and kind of the origin of his company. He had a local butcher come to him, and they basically built a banner for his website. Yep. And it's basically his head, and it comes apart and says the daily special every day with like a giant sandwich going into his mouth. And it's been like the most highly engaging thing. He's like, I go into the butcher every Friday, and he forks over a fistful of cash to pay for their digital ad spend. But just you got to think a little differently like that.
Look, kids are having a hard time finding jobs these days, particularly because of AI. Kids, right out of college or maybe even right out of high school, they know a lot more about video production than us old heads do. They can do crap on an iPhone that we can't do, and it looks really, really professional. And they're just fun, and they're entertaining these younger people, and they know the medium really well. Why not engage them and, spend some money, give some money to them to go out and tell people's story and say, it's $500 a pop or $1,000 or $1,500 to do it. We'll put it on YouTube. We can put it on your website. We'll put it on our website. I don't know. Start somewhere, but start telling the community's story rather than telling the community what your story is and what you found.
Awesome. Yeah. Great message to drive home. We've touched on most of these other ones. So I've been asking this to everybody recently. With so much change in the media advertising ecosystems, I'd like to hear your two things: your hopes and your predictions for what the whole industry is going to look like in 5 years, in 2030.
God, I've been doing this so long. My main hope is to retire soon. There's a guy whose head, we talked a lot about newspapers, but radio in the game in a pretty big way, and TV as well. Radio are probably the bigger formidable competitors for newspapers at this point because of their history of morphing into something else and seizing the opportunity. The head of the Radio Advertising Bureau, a guy named Mike Holvey, is a guy that we all should emulate. He's just really, really positive and gung-ho, and not about radio, AM, FM, terrestrial radio. Yes, about that, of course, but about radio's role in the marketplace and what it does in small local communities, keeping people informed. In these news deserts, what we've all forgotten is there's a radio station that, that covers that market and reads the news. And it's probably more listened to than the newspaper ever was. It usually is that way. So my point in mentioning him is, you asked, what's the hope? My hope would be that everybody feels like, gets the energy and the positivity of this guy, Mike Holvey. His blood type, believe it or not, is B positive. he was born on March 4th. So it's like, amid all this scary stuff about AI and, consistent decline in newspapers and layoffs, really hard to be positive, but you want to survive, be positive. The world belongs to people who believe, right? So that would be my positive message in terms of predictions and what is going to happen in the future. I do see the rise of marketing technology companies, and there are a lot of them out there, kind of overlapping that of agencies and slipping into the role that some media companies have held in terms of guiding advertisers about where to put their dollars and how to write their copy and what things should look like. So, we see AI collapsing, maybe 50 to 60% of the employee base of ad agencies, where most ad agencies then will just slip back into creative roles, but not ad placement, ad decision, ad strategy. The marketing technology companies will play a role in that, and media companies should, and should try to understand, what that actually means. So that's a big change in the landscape. I think AI is going to significantly change things. If you look at things in terms of sort of a Hegelian theory, and that is an absolute eventually materializes, but it goes through a process. You can apply that to the internet. The internet kind of started, for all intents and purposes, as a commercial medium in 1995, and went through 5 years of growing and growing and growing, and huge amounts of hype. Just where we are with AI right now.
Hmm.
AI was kind of 2022, I think, was the birth year of AI, which we would reference to 1995 for the internet. What happened 5 years later? In 2000, there was a dot-com bubble burst. That will happen in 1996, maybe late 1996. So we've gone through these stages of what I referenced, which is this Hegelian theory thing. And there's this immediateness. Oh my God, look at all this stuff, which we're in right now. Then an alienation, like, yeah, glad that didn't play out, which happened during the dot-com bubble burst, which will happen. Oh yeah, I knew there was a lot of hype in it. Everybody wants it to go away because it represents scary change. But then what happens is the strengthening of the result that occurs over the next couple of years, and then the negation of the negation, and that is, yeah, it is really going to work out. And look what happened to the internet from 2001 to 2005, 6, 7, 8, before the next great economic trigger, the recession, where everything just really took off because people were forced to change. So I think you have a little bit of window to figure out what AI means. There will be a dot-com bubble burst, in AI, an AI bubble burst. Don't relax during that period. That is the time to really double down on everything, because a lot of the noise will go away, a little bit easier to operate. And then, I think 2027, 2028, there will be a great collapse of, people that don't get it and have kind of forgotten and don't have enough money to sustain a new business model. And then, the new thing is created. So to me, all I hear is, God, you got to retire by 2027. But it's, I think 2030, is the equivalent of, maybe 2020, when the pandemic was the next trigger, and everything changed. Few
Hmm.
people came into work and people canceled subscriptions. Nobody listened to radio and, all kinds of craziness. So we're barreling toward that. We've got what, 5 more years, 4 more years before that occurs. So there's just a smaller and smaller window of opportunity to change. But change is a good thing if you can embrace it. When the pain of not changing exceeds the pain of having to change, that's when things start to happen.
Yeah. I see a lot of parallels with AI and that internet era also. And, for all the hype companies, all the pets.coms out there, they're going to go away. There's also going to be some Amazons,
Oh yeah.
that are going to take over the world later on. Yeah. Um, okay, Gordon, this has been great. We touched everything that I had written down. Where can people find you online? What do you want to promote? What do you want me to link to? All that stuff.
Sure. It just, most of our business really is with companies that are trying to understand and change in the context of what is really happening, factual. It's not some talking head. We have lots and lots of data showing what's happening and where the money is being spent in local markets. And that's where we make our money, in licensing that and seeing that and understanding the flow of that advertising. I guarantee you'll have sales reps or people on the, chief revenue officer, if you have one of those, look at that data and go, well, I didn't know that was happening. Because you see what you see, and you see it every single day. And most media people, this is a fact, media people can see about 3 to 4 to maybe at the most 7% of all the advertising that is placed by local businesses in the market. That means they're missing 93% maybe. So BorrellAssociates.com, 2 R's and 2 L's. Just Google us, Borrell. And on the front page of our website, you'll see a kind of rotating box that says, some stuff that we have. There's a benchmarking report. There's a new report that we just did on email. Marketers are using email phenomenally less these days. So if you're trying to reach them by email, good luck. And at the bottom of that box, each one that rotates says sign up for our research alert list. Just click on that and sign up. And we'll start sending you stuff. We have a podcast. We have something really cool called Corey's Local Marketing Minute. There's the studio for it. It's really great. It's about 3-4 minutes long, and it's funny as hell. And then we have research reports that come out and big webinars that we do. Our new forecast for 2026 for every local market, and we're going to give the details of each local market out during that webinar. I think it's in late December. Is coming up. So if you sign up for research alerts, we'll notify you when that webinar is.
Awesome. I'll link to all that stuff. I'm going to check out that marketing minute too. I didn't know about that. Might watch that for my own
it's on
enjoyment.
It's on our website under Insights, I think, or you can go to YouTube and search for Corey, Corey, Corey's Local Marketing Minute. So I have to laugh. It's funny. He's so smart and he's just so funny about things. It's kind of cool. A lot of sales staffs use it as their training. If they need weekly training, we'll just use Corey's latest minute. What's it about? Oh, that's great. Let's use it. It's cool stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, you said entertain people and give them the information. So there you go.
You got 7 seconds before you get swiped, so keep them entertained.
Cool. All right, Gordon, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you have a great weekend.
You too.
All right, thanks.